In this video, I'm going to show you how to flesh and put up a coon hide. So I've got a raccoon hide here. Now most of the time when I get done skinning, when I'm running my traps, when I skin an animal, I'll throw it in the freezer and come back and flesh it later, just because it's more efficient for me. And you know, you spend a lot of time on the trap line, you spend a lot of time skinning if you make any good catches. So fleshing and stretching is just another thing to kind of take up some more time. So to kind of spread it out and make sure I spend time with my family and all, I usually will trap, skin, throw furs in the freezer, and then you know, once trapping season goes out, or when I got a little downtime on the weekends, then I'll kind of flesh a few, you know, try to lay out 6 or 8 hides and flesh them at one time and process them like that. So usually what I do is just I keep some Walmart sacks or some grocery bags in the freezer or around handy, and I'll just throw the hide into the bag. And there's no real trick to it. You know, you'll hear people talk about rolling them from the nose to the tail and putting them in there. The big thing I would say is just make sure it's fur out, because you can, you know, your hide can get freezer burn. So I'd rather try to prevent that. But I don't worry a lot with it. It's kind of a small coon, but I skin it, turn it fur out, and then just kind of fold it over and throw it in a Walmart bag, throw it in the freezer. One thing I would caution you is you want to make sure that you don't have too many hides pile up on top of each other, you know, because of the insulative qualities of your fur. You want to make sure that you give the fur enough room, because I mean it's already folded over, so that the inner part is going to take longer to freeze anyway. You don't want to pile extra hides on top of it that may keep it from freezing too long, and you can actually even get not rust, but rot on your hide. Your hide start to rot because it's not frozen fast enough. So you know, I don't worry about too much. Like I say, if I've got several hides at one time, I'll try to spread them out in the freezer, make sure they all get frozen evenly, and then, you know, I'll throw them when I get ready. Two days or so before I know I'm going to get ready to flesh, I'll throw them all in a cooler, put the lid on the cooler if it's going to be halfway warm, and you know, 2 days in there. You can see this one's actually got a little bit of ice and stuff on it. It's not totally thaw, but it's just right, because it didn't get too warm, but it's still good enough that it will flesh real nicely. So I'm going to take it, I've thawed it out, I'm going to take it and turn it flesh side out and put it on my beam here. I've got a couple of beams. I've got a wooden and a PVC beam. Right now, I also, if you've seen one of my other videos, I do a pretty good bit of fleshing with a pressure washer. So that's what I use this PVC beam for. I've also got a wooden beam that I keep in the fur shed, but this one's handy, so I'm gonna go ahead and flesh on this. And it's small enough that I can just slide the entire hide on here. If you've got a large hide, or maybe you're talking about coyotes or something like that, and you don't want to do too much bending over, you can you know, slide the hide on there maybe halfway, where the remainder of the hide is hanging off the beam, and then use your waist or your body to hold it in place as you're pushing, trying to flesh. And then, you know, you can slide it on down. Beavers, it's kind of handy to do that. Otters, coyotes, any of your larger hides. Most of the time coons aren't that big, so you don't have to worry about this, especially this dinky old southern coon. I know some of you guys out north of here, you know, up north, y'all got some pretty decent coons. So, but anyway, I've got it on the board. Now I'm going to just talk fleshing knives. I use a necker when I'm not using my pressure washer, and you can see most fleshing knives excuse me, most fleshing knives are going to have this curve to them, you know, to fit your fleshing beam. And the neckers, the thing I like about it is it's got a dull side and then a sharp side. So, you know, depending on how much and what all you're going to be fleshing, the cheaper knives that you get will just have the dull side. And for a lot of animals, for some animals, that's okay. You know, like muskrat, mink, some of those animals don't really have a whole lot of fat on them, so you don't have to do a lot to them. Some coons aren't too bad, but I would say if you're going to invest, you know, if you're getting into trapping, it takes an investment anyways. An investment in a decent fleshing knife would be pretty good. And these neckers are, I want to say 50 or 60 bucks, 60, 70 bucks, something like that. So it's not outlandish, especially when you consider that, you know, this is what's going to turn your fur hopefully into money. So the better you prepare it and the more time you spend on it, the better off you're going to be. But the typically most of the time you're using the dull side. When you would turn it around and use the sharp side, and it's not like razor sharp, but it is a little bit more sharp. You know, on beavers, especially around the tail where it gets real gristly, otters can sometimes be gristly or thickly fatted, or you know, even raccoons up around the shoulders, or down around the tail. If you get a really fatty coon, you know, you can use that sharp side to kind of slice the fat off versus trying to just push it with that dull side. That's really all you're doing. And I should say that, you know, the purpose of fleshing is to get any fat and meat off of the hide. So, you know, you want to be left with a nice, clean, kind of white looking hide that doesn't have any more fat or meat on it, because that fat and the meat is what can cause the hide to rot. So that's what you want to eliminate. So let's go ahead and flesh this coon. Also, I didn't mention it, but I'm wearing an apron, and you can see it's actually got some rubber underneath it. And this is just something that, you know, I kind of made up, but they also make, you know, like a vinyl type apron. This flesh, the fleshing process is pretty kind of dirty and nasty, and that flesh has got, or the fat, it's got its own unique smell to it. And if you get that in your clothes, it's never coming out. So you either always want to make sure you're wearing some clothes that you're not too fond of, or have something to protect your clothes from that fat getting on them. Another thing is if you're in an area that tends to have a lot of burrs or sand spurs or cuckleburrs or anything like that, you may want to brush your fur before you get ready to flesh it, because the fleshing knife, you know, what you're doing here is you're putting pressure on the hide, downward pressure down on the hide and down the board as you're going. So you're trying to push all that stuff off. And if you've got any burrs or anything like that, they're liable to get caught by this knife and just rip you a giant hole in your hide. So that would be one thing that I would caution you about. But really, I mean, the process is pretty straightforward, especially with something that doesn't have, you know, an animal that's relatively fat-free. This coon, lucky for me, doesn't have a whole lot of fat on it. But you can see, and you'll have to get pretty in tune, pushing pretty hard to get that going anywhere. And one there, you know, a million different ways to do it. One thing I like to do is kind of go around the bottom of the hide and get all the flesh off there, and then I'll slide it on down and work this top half of the hide. And that way you're not trying to take the whole, you know, work the whole hide at one time. So really, that's what you're kind of looking for, is just kind of a clean white hide there with no fat. I mean, you can see what the fat looks like, and so you want no fat, no meat. You can see here there's some meat, red meat, pink meat. I'm going to work on that in just a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and try to get this lower half done. When you get around to the belly, that tends to be the most sensitive, so definitely use caution. And you can see that where that flesh and that fat is coming off, and that nice pretty white hide right there, that's exactly what you're going for. And then, you know, if you get it off, you can always just pull it. Once you get it kind of down to the end, once you get it hanging off, you can just kind of pull it to finish it off. The armpits also tend to be another spot that's pretty tender. Of course, if it's a female animal, where the teats would be, those are going to be soft spots. You need to watch out for that as well. Those are kind of anywhere on the belly really is a good place to put a hole in your hide. It's not so much on a small hide. On a larger hide like a beaver or something like that, it can be handy when you get around these leg holes to use the leg hole on the end of your fleshing beam. And that way, because it can be hard to get under the armpit when that leg's kind of trying to fold over on itself. So I'll use that area right there, that as a hold, try to get a little bit of this flesh off here. You can see my fantastic skinning job. I put a couple of nicks right here in the chin. That's an area you want to use caution with as well. Obviously, if there's already a hole there, it's that much easier to put a bigger hole there. If you get to somewhere where you wanted to use the sharp side, like I said, this coon didn't really need it. Pretty easy to flesh. But if you want to use the sharp side, typically you want to do that in kind of a slicing motion, kind of more like a knife than a fleshing knife. Got this little bit of fat here that I'm going to try, or this meat here right around the ear that I'm just going to try to shave off. I hate the face. The face is the most tedious part to me. So. Get this finished off here. That's pretty good. Pull it off here and give it a little once over. A little bit right there on the chin, or between the legs. See if we can. A little patch right there that we're going to try to get off. Let's try to get it as clean as possible. Hold it in place, and it is possible to kind of flesh so much that you actually start seeing hairs coming through on your hide. It's not what you want to do. You want to stop before you get to that point. So it's usually not an issue on bigger coons, or good prime coons. But I'd say overall that coon looks pretty clean. What I like to do with my furs, a lot of times I'll try to do it before I wash them, or before I flesh them, is I like to wash them, just rinse them out. Nothing special like putting them in a washing machine or anything, but I get a 5-gallon bucket full of water with a little detergent, turn them fur side out, and this one's actually pretty clean. With coons a lot of times you'll get blood, especially around the head, on the ears. So that's what I try to avoid by washing them, or try to get rid of by washing them. But I'll just take them fur out, stick them down in that bucket of water and detergent, shuffle them around a little bit. I might leave them in there a few seconds or a few minutes, shake them around, do a little spin cycle, and then pull it out, squeegee all the water that I can out of it. You might want to snap them. Once you get it fairly dry, you can grab him by the nose and just pop him like that. That's a good way to get some of the water out once you've got most of the excess water out.